I've always had a thing for blobs. I'm not sure exactly why. Anyways, yesterday I sat down and decided I just gotta create my very own blob creature generator. After a while of researching, I realized that I could potentially create a function that randomly generates blobs. And then add some eyes and like a body that could be a shape, like a circle. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a new folder for our application. Let's call it Blob Maker. And now let's open it in Visual Studio Code. We can just drag and drop it. Now let's open Terminal. The shortcut for opening Terminal in VS Code is Control and backtick. And now the first thing we need to do is to check that we have Node installed. We need Node because we'll be creating a React application shortly. All right, we have Node, and let's check that we have npm installed as well. All right, so what I typed is node flag v. This shows the version I have currently. If you don't have Node, you will see an error instead of the version numbers. Same for npm. Now it's time to create the scaffolding for our React application. We're going to use Vite for that. So to get the command, we'll open the Vite docs and copy the create Vite command. Just paste it. Okay. Let's name our project. How about we name it Blobster? Blobster, and hit enter. All right, and now it's asking us to select a framework. We will use React, and we just want to use JavaScript for today. Let's follow these instructions. cd Blobster. Now npm install. We can type npm I instead of install because it's shorter. And then we wait. And now we type in npm run dev to start our application in dev mode. And there it is. I like to open it in my always on top browser because I'd like to see the changes that happen as I code. Okay, let's go into our source folder. Open app.jsx. Let's remove the import statements. Let's keep the connection to app.css. We're not going to be editing it for now. Let's remove the code we don't need. We're gonna remove everything between those React fragments. And that's it. Now let's create a components folder and a new JSX file in our components folder, and let's call it RandomBlob.jsx. Now let's create a functional component that will hold our random blob. One way to create components very quickly is to use this extension. It allows you to quickly create code snippets. For example, to create a React component, you just type RFC and hit enter, and you have the code snippet created for you. The first thing we want to do is create an SVG element, which will serve as a container or a canvas for our blob creature. Let's begin by defining the width of our canvas. How about we set it to 400 at first, and let's also define the height as well. Right, there we go. Now let's add in the values here. Width equals width and height equals height. Okay, now let's add in the circle and let's put it in the middle of our canvas. To do that, let's set cx to width divided 2 and cy to height over 2. Let's set the radius to 100 for a start. And let's make the fill white for now. To preview our random blob component, let's add it to our app.jsx. Random blob. Right, as you can see, Visual Studio Code imported the component for us. Okay, so now it should appear in our app. Oh, and there it is. How about we get our circle to have a random radius every time it is spun up. However, we don't want our random radius to be too small or too big. So let's get it to have a random radius between 40 and 100. Since we don't want any fractions, so we'll start with math.floor, and then let's use math.random. And since we want our random number to be within an interval, then we will multiply with the highest number of our interval, and then we subtract the lowest number and add +1, and then we add all of that to our lowest number again, and this should give us a random radius between 100 and 40. Okay, let's put it in our return function. Okay, there it is. How about we also get our circle to have a random color every time it is spun? To do that, let's first create an array to keep our colors. Let's call it circle colors. And now let's find some nice colors to put inside our array. How about we choose a warm color like this one? Let's just copy it and paste it. Okay, and how about color like this one and this one? And let's choose one more. Right, now we need to create a function that will allow us to select a value from an array. Let's create a new folder and call it functions. And now let's create a file and call it RandomBlob.jsx, where we'll put our function. Now let's define it. So function random index generator. Let's add in array as an argument. And since our function will return a random index, let's define a random index variable, math.floor, math.random times array dot length, and we should return the random index. Okay, to be able to use our function anywhere in the project, we should export it. To do that, just add export before the word function. Now let's go back to our RandomBlob file and import our function. So import random index generator. All right, now let's use it. So const random circle color equals circle colors, and our index will be random index generator and circle colors. And now we will replace white with our random circle color. Okay, let's see if it worked. Let's refresh. Yay, it works. All right, so now we've created a function that creates a circle which serves as the body of our blob creature. What we need to do now is create a function that will create the random blob that will serve as the head of our creature. So let's do it. Let's go to our functions folder and create a new file. Let's call it blobGenerator.js. All right, let's define our function. Function blobGenerator. We want it to accept width and height as arguments. Before we write down any code, the first thing we want our function to generate random coordinates for points that follow a circular pattern. Our second to do is to initiate a path. The third thing we need to do is to connect the points and draw a path that resembles a blob. And lastly, we want to close the path and return the path data. All right, time to attend to do number 1. First thing we want to do is define the number of points we want our shape to have. Let's make it 6 points. Now let's create an array that's going to hold the points that we're going to create shortly. To create our points and add them to our points array, we're going to create a loop. We're going to loop as many times as num points. So let I equal 0 as long as I is less than num points. I increment 1. Now let's define const angle, which is going to help us evenly distribute the points in a circular manner. It equates to current index over number of points, which will create a fraction. And then we'll multiply that fraction by 2 times math.pi, which equates to a circle in radians. To make it that each point has a different distance to the center, let's create a radius variable, and it's going to have a random number between 0 and let's say 160. So math.random times 160. Let's define the x-coordinate. Const x equals width divided 2. Well, we're dividing width by 2 because we want our point relatively close to the center. We'll add that to the radius and we'll multiply that by the cosine of the angle. Similarly, let's define the y-coordinate. So height divided 2 plus radius times, here we'll be multiplying by sine angle instead of cosine. Let's add our x and y coordinates to our points array as an object. So points.push x and y. Now let's initiate a path, put it in a string template, and start it with the m command. M stands for move to, and since we want our shape to start at the first points in our points array, let's first add in the x-coordinate using string interpolation, and then do the same for our y-coordinate. Add it using string interpolation as well. And now for the fun part, we need to connect the points that we've already created through this loop. And we're going to do that through another loop. This time we're going to loop through our points array. We are going to initialize our loop from the second element in our array since we have already added the first element to our path. So I equal 1 as long as I is less than points.length I plus. So within this loop, we're going to use the Bezier command to connect the points that we have already created. And in order to achieve that, we're going to need 2 control points for each point. Let's create a variable to hold the current x coordinate and another one to hold the current y coordinate. Now let's define the x coordinate of what will be our control point. It will be the current x coordinate plus the x coordinate of the upcoming point in the loop. And in order to make sure that our shape closes up we are going to add modulo numPoints dot x, and then we'll divide this by 2. Doing this will calculate the midpoint between the current x coordinate that we are at and the upcoming x coordinate. Alright, now let's calculate the control point's y coordinate. Similarly, we'll add the y coordinate of the current point we're at to the y coordinate to the upcoming point, and in the index we're going to do modulo numPoints to ensure that our shape curves back to the first point if this is the last point, and we'll divide that by 2. So now we have a point and a control point, which means we're ready to create the Bezier command and append it to our path data string. So path data plus equal. And once again, we're going to create a template literal. So we'll start it with backticks. We'll begin with a capital C, which stands for Cubic Bezier. And then using string interpolation, we'll add the x coordinate of the current point followed by the y coordinate of the current point. And then we'll add the x coordinate and the y coordinate of the control points. We're actually going to add them twice. Doing that ensures that our path operates smoothly, and this way we avoid any sharp turns or sharp corners from one point to the next. Now for our last mission. We need to close the path and return the path data. The command for closing the path is z. So let's append it to our path data variable. So path data plus equal quotes z. And that should close our path. Now let's return path data. Now we're done with our function. In order to be able to use it in our RandomBlob.jsx file, we need to export it. So let's add the word export before the word function. Now let's go to our RandomBlob.jsx file to try out our function. Okay, now let's import it. Alright, now let's try to use it. So const blob path equals blobGenerator, and let's pass in width and height. Alright, now let's go to our SVG element and add within it path. And we're going to equate D to blob path. By the way, D stands for data. And now let's set fill equal to pink and close our path. Alright, now let's run an app and see if it works. Alright, there it is. Oh, it's appearing behind the circle and we want it to be the other way around. Right, to fix this, we're going to go back and move our path and put it after our circle element. Let's see if it worked. It works! Alright, now we need eyes. To get eyes, we'll just go to Google and we search for eyes SVG. And we keep searching until we find something we like. And we download that. If our download gives us an archived file, we need to unarchive it and then get the SVG file. And we'll need to open that SVG file in a program that is capable of editing SVG and exporting SVG, such as Illustrator or Figma. Alright, let's go to Figma. Create a new draft or whatever. Add a new frame. Alright, find your file, your SVG file with the eyes, and drag it into your Figma frame. And ungroup the eyes. And then, whichever eyes you want, we're going to select them like this. And go down here. It says export, you see. And we're going to export as SVG. And then hit export group. Okay, and then we're going to repeat that for the pairs we want. Okay, let's export this one. How about this pair as well? Make sure it's SVG. Right, how about this one? That one is funny. Let's get it. Right, make sure it's SVG. Okay, and this one looks judgmental, like it's judging me. Let's get it. Let's export it. How about this guy? Oh, looks a bit scared maybe. I don't know, embedded expressions. Let's get it exported as SVG. And how about this guy? He's so pissed. Let's get it exported. Make sure it's SVG. Right, so now we have a bunch of eyes that we can use on our blobs, which are gonna make our blobs cool and funny. We're gonna be able to find the eyes we've just downloaded in our downloads folder, and they're right here. Okay, so let's create a new folder for our eyes. Let's call it blobster eyes. And now let's get our group of eyes and put them inside. All right, let's open our Visual Studio Code again. Let's delete the React logo from our assets folder. And now let's get our blobster eyes, and we're going to move it into our assets folder. So let's just drag and drop it into our assets folder. In order to be able to use our eyes in our code, we need to import them. Let's rename our eyes so that they're easier to import. You can simply rename them to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right now, let's import them one by one. So import I1 from assets, blobster eyes, right? And then we'll just import the rest. Okay, now let's create an array to hold our eyes. So const eyes equals I1, I2, I3. You get the point, and then the rest of the eyes. Now the exciting part, to add our eyes to our SVG. So in order to do that, we are going to use the G tag, which is basically a container element or group element, since G stands for group. Okay, so we want to have our path inside the group tag, and we want to put an image element after our tag, and that's where our eyes will be. Let's set X to 150 and Y to 150 as well, and let's set the height to 100. And now let's set X-link href to eyes, and then random index generator eyes. All right, and now the fun part. Let's see if it worked. It worked. Okay. All right, so now we have adorable blobs that spin up when we refresh. But how about we make that happen when we click a button? Maybe we don't want to refresh every time, because that's a bit annoying, right? Okay, so let's add a button, and let's get the button to say click me. So right now our button is to the side, and we don't really like that. Let's add some CSS styling to our div. Let's change display to flex, and let's make the flex direction equal to column. Oh, now we're closer. Okay, now let's align items center. And I think that looks much better. Okay, but our button does nothing right now. We want something to happen when we click it. So let's add onClick attribute, and onClick, we would like to trigger a function called changeBlob, although we haven't created it yet. So let's define it. Const changeBlob. Okay, and what we want to happen when the const changeBlob function is triggered is for the circle's color to change, the blob shape to change, and the eye to change as well. To do that, let's first import useState from React, and let's comment out this line. Instead, let's define random circle color as state variable and set random circle color equals useState, and let's initialize it to this color. Right, and when the changeBlob function is triggered, we can also set random circle color. All right, let's click the button and see what happens. Even though the only thing that we are changing in our changeBlob function is the random circle color, the eyes are changing as well as the blob shape. The reason why this is happening is because once we click the button, our entire component is re-rendered. That does not mean our work is done, as defining state variables properly is really important because it ensures that the changes in our component data are accurately tracked and efficiently updated. So let's do it. So instead of let random radius, let's define another state variable, random radius, and set random radius equals useState, and let's initialize it to 30. Right, and let's copy this, and here let's set random radius and paste the function that we've created earlier that generates a random radius between 40 and 100. Let's set the blob path. So const blob path and set blob path equals useState. Let's initialize it to null, right? And set blob path, and we can just add in our blobGenerator function. And now the eyes. Const random eye and set random eye equals useState. And let's copy this and paste it and set random eye. We just add in the eyes array, within it the random index generator function, and then we just add in the random eye state variable to the xlength href. Looks like everything works very well. All right, now how about we change the title of our page and then add a favicon that we're actually going to create through our app, and then turn it into an .svg file that we can use. Okay, let's go to our index.html file and change the title. Let's call it lobster. All right, and now let's go to our public folder and let's rename this file. Let's call it blob. And now let's go back to our index.html file and change the import statement to match the name of our SVG file. So blob.svg instead of Vite. So we want our SVG to hold the image of a blob. So let's go to our app and let's generate a blob we want to use. Let's hit inspect and we're going to find our SVG, and we just want the path. So let's copy it. Okay, and now let's replace all the code in our SVG file, and there we go, we have a path. But like this, it's not gonna work. Let's add in the SVG tag, and now in order to get it to work, we need to add in namespace. Okay, and now we need to give our path appropriate width and height. Maybe we can try out setting the width to 64 and the height to 64 as well. And now in order to make sure that we have proper aspect ratio, it's a good idea to also define view box settings. Okay, and I think now it should work. So Let's see. Oh, there it is. It works. Okay, if you don't like the color, we can change the fill. We can make it any color we like. So how about blue? And there it is. Alright guys, we've done it. We've created our very own blob generator. I hope you put it in good use. But seriously though, please let me know what you think. And if you liked this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye-bye.